like to call this April 1st, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting work session to order. Mr. Anagnostou, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell,
Here.
Mrs. Soe,
Here.
Mr. Micko,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mrs. Hausum.
Here.
You're all present. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Next on our agenda is our district goals. Our district goals remain academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement. And I'm sure at some point on April 1st meeting, we'll have a motion to cancel all summer break and stay in school for the entire summer break so that we can advance our goal of academic achievement.
April Fools.
That's not happening? Next on our agenda is public comment. I have no slips. I see no other public comment. And I turn it over to Dr. Ryba for superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. We do have two items for discussion. First is the responsible restart plan. Our data has been trending in the right direction, pretty consistent over the last couple weeks, as I shared with the board and I'll share with the community. This is the last meeting. We'll have a specific agenda item on the restart plan. If things change and we have a topic to discuss, we will. But we've updated the building level dashboard. It's on the website now. Everything is pretty much green and a few yellows sprinkled in here or there. So we are moving in a good direction. So unless there's any questions, we'll transition to our next agenda item.
I think that's great news.
It is good news. Next up, we want to talk about some of our strategic planning items. And so I'm going to ask Steve Breckner, our operations manager, to come to the podium to talk about some items he's been working on in his department. Steve?
Good evening, everyone. The first topic I wanted to bring up is the one that you have in front of you here, the PowerPoint presentation, but then also on the screen. Something called needlepoint bipolar ionization, and I did not make that up. That's the name of the, what this is, and I'll go in depth, but this is addressing some of the concerns with our HVAC and indoor air quality. So the first slide is really what has prompted this, of course. You know, I would not be telling the truth if I didn't say COVID didn't hasten some of this change. Of course, we're worried about COVID. We're worried about the spread of it. At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of, you know, how do we spread this? How can we take care of this? You know, we were purchasing volumes and volumes of hand sanitizer and masks and all the PPE, things that, you know, were empty in the warehouse before. Now, you know, we're stockpiled and sold at a premium, and now I have vendors calling me all the time saying, don't you want more masks? Don't you want more wipes? Are you sure you don't need more gallons of hand sanitizer all the time? So, you know, the world today looks a lot different than it did in the fall. And to be honest, this is one of the few times I'm going to mention COVID in this presentation, because while this will help with the spread of COVID, it's also a universal solution to help the indoor air quality in all of our buildings, not just with COVID. So what we know about COVID, it can be transmitted by surface contact. We know that. At first, we thought that was one of the primary ways it was transmitted. But the CDC is now reporting it's mainly person to person through the air. Some studies have shown 80 to 90% of the spread was actually caused from person to person. You know, not socially distancing. Not practicing safe boundaries. So the conclusion that we've come to as a district, and really nothing surprising that the world hasn't come to, is yes, it's always been and always will be a good idea to disinfect surfaces as often as possible. But disinfecting surfaces, wearing masks, and social distancing have definitely helped. But we still need to take steps as a district to destroy viruses, including but not limited to COVID, because they exist in the air. And as we're putting more air and exchanging more air into our buildings and exhausting more air, Yes, it will address COVID, but it'll also address influenza, it will address common cold, it will address all those nasty viruses and particles that come in from the outside into our buildings. Because of COVID, because of all the increased speculation on indoor air quality, there is a group named ASHRAE that went around and did some indoor air studies and basically came up with a 24-page report. And in that report, they covered everything from healthcare buildings, hospitals, hospice care, nursing homes, all those, down to schools and other commercial buildings. So I hit the top recommendations from this group. And the one that we are already doing, that we took as a proactive measure, increase outdoor air ventilation, disable demand-controlled ventilation, and open outdoor air dampers to 100% as indoor and outdoor conditions permit. Now, that's easier said than done in Ohio, where, I don't know, maybe some current examples show that it could be 70 one day and then snowing the next. But as much as possible, so what this means is everything right now is on controls. So the unit says it is so hot outside or it's so cold outside, it has a set temperature, and then it will actually automatically close and open the air dampers to allow either the cooling or the heating to continue. What we've been doing is taking that offline, using those when it's possible. Now, when it's snowing outside, we're not going to have 100% air coming through. You'll get more phone calls. Actually, you'll get phone calls and transmit more phone calls to me when that happens, or vice versa. If it's 90 degrees outside, we have to regulate. But when it's these midline temperatures, we've been overriding the system to say, no, just open them all the way, and we'll put a little bit more energy into getting that air exchange to happen. They also recommended keeping systems running longer hours, if possible, 24/7. We primarily do run 24/7 because of the nature of our buildings. We never really turn the HVAC off. We're always doing air exchange. We may lower the set points so that we're not heating as if the building's completely full during the winter, but we never go up and just turn the unit off and let the air sit stagnant. We're always moving air through our buildings. So that one's taken care of. The last one is really what needlepoint bipolar ionization or needlepoint ionization is going to help us with. Improve central air and other HVAC filtration to MERV 13 or the highest achievable level, which sounds great, but prompts a question that I asked when I saw this: what the heck is MERV? And why do we care if it's 13 or 12 or 10? So here's the answer to that. What is MERV? It's a minimum efficiency reporting value, which basically, if I break this down, and you've seen air filters before, of course, in your furnaces, what the MERV rating is not only the thickness of the material that's being used, but the weave of the material that's being used. So if you can imagine like a MERV, let's just say a MERV 4, you have a lot of space between your fingers. As you tighten that up, that tightens up the rating. That's just the layman's example for that. It's very technical, but for our conversation purposes, that's what's going on. It goes 1 to 20, the MERV rating. You can see in there, and the one I want to center in on is the third one there. And you can see as you go through where your window air conditioners fall all the way through. 20 is where companies like 3M that make adhesives and the command hooks and things like that, those, you have to have the best air rating possible. You have the best filters possible, because if any particulates or any kind of particles get in there, it ruins the adhesive. Where we have been sitting for years and years and years is that range of 9 to 12. We've actually been using 8 to 10 filters, MERV rating filters, and that's been the industry standard. So if you can see there, 8 is basically residential air conditioners, but they've also, in most of your commercial buildings, we're using 8. And then a few years back, I can't tell you how many, I know it's been over 10, we started moving to 10. The industry sort of shifted, and they went up to 10. So we were basically at the lower end there of like hospital laboratories or superior residential air conditioners. This new recommendation changed everything. And it came out in April of 2020. So a year ago. Like I said in the previous slide, they said we need to move to MERV 13. Before this, MERV 13 was really, as you can see in there, patient and surgery areas of hospitals. So that's the level that we are being recommended to go to. I can't tell you that it's ever going, I can't sit here and lie to you and say that there's going to be some law that comes out that says we need to go to MERV 13. But there are going to be questions asked of what we did post-pandemic to increase the amount of filtration and what we did to improve air quality in our buildings. So I'm not going to promise you that there's a law coming down with that, but there are going to be a lot of questions of what exactly did you do? And people are going to look at this government agency and say, well, this was their recommendation. How did you move closer? Because if you look at the language on the slide back, MERV 13 or the highest level will achievable. Doing nothing will keep us at the 8 to 10 range. Issues with the MERV 13, because it sounds great. Let's move to MERV 13. We'll buy a bunch of those filters for the buildings and we'll move on and we'll call it a day. So Needle Point, why are you bringing this to us? The reality of it is we cannot move to MERV 13. And I'm not being dramatic when I say that. Some of our systems just simply will not allow that to happen. If you've ever put the wrong filter in your furnace at home and open up your furnace, you'll notice that the filter is being sucked almost into the furnace, if you've ever experienced that before. Or, and I'm not trying to get into waterboarding, but if you ever have a shirt, we all are wearing masks now, soak that mask down and then try and breathe through it. That's what we're going to be doing to all of our filtration units, all of our HVAC units, is put a filter in there that was not designed to be put in. It's restricting air that was not supposed to be restricted in such a way. What that's going to do is a few different things here. It's going to put strain on the motors. It's going to burn out the motors. So we either have to replace motors at an increased rate or purchase bigger motors, if that's even possible in these units. Because remember, the units only have so much space. And we're talking about units like this that are rooftop units. We're talking about units that are in the classroom, those big steel blocks. Those are our air handlers in those individual units. And we're also, in some of the buildings, we have what's called VAVs. Those are hit up into the ceiling, but they're all individual units. Every single one of those are going to have to be addressed, and those solutions are all going to be in different ways, all involving moving parts, all involving a lot of cost. So not only would the motors have to be replaced, in some of our units that even can be fitted for MERV 13, we're going to have to increase the amount of exhaust to get the air to move through, because we're restricting airflow at one end, so we're going to be pushing a bunch of air through with those bigger motors pushing the air. We're going to have to buy exhaust motors to push the air back out. If you don't have that, you're going to have we're going to be out of equilibrium and air pressure in our buildings. If you've ever been in a building, or you've been at a house and the doors always seem to slam shut, it's because the air is not pressurized the right way. And that could happen because of wind, it could happen because the windows are open. If you ever opened your car and heard that thrumming noise and you're yelling at your kids, because that's just what you're supposed to do whenever you have an annoying noise in your ear. You roll down the window, you equalize the pressure. That's what's going to start to happen in our buildings if we don't equalize the amount of air that we're pulling in and the air that's being exchanged out. And those filters are going to cause those type of issues. MERV 13 filters also are usually thicker than MERV 8 filters, so quite simply the brackets that we have holding our filters in place would have to be replaced. And again, not all of our units are going to be able to have that kind of retrofit. To do this and do it district-wide and across in a fair and balanced manner, we're just going to have to replace some of these units. Right now, we spend $15,000 to $18,000 annually on filters, and again, that's MERV 8 and 10. The MERV 13 filters are double that at the least. I am going to predict, with my vast business background, that as this becomes more of a commodity that people are using, I don't see a price break on these. I see a price increase. And also, right now, if I was to wave a magic wand to make all of our systems MERV 13, I couldn't even buy the filters right now. Because the newest construction And those companies that have been able to retrofit and make everything MERV 13, they've bought up all the supplies. And just like in the business world, a lot of things have happened with the supply chain being shortened or being congested, it would be very difficult to get the filters in at this point in time. And I don't know when that's going to loosen up. So those are the issues moving forward. If we were just to say, let's go with ASHRAE's recommendation and use MERV 13. So what I've been talking to vendors, what I've been researching myself, or what are some of the alternatives? The best alternative that I've seen, the best alternative that I'm going to present to you that I've seen and most cost effective is this idea of needlepoint ionization. Needlepoint bipolar ionization. So I have in there and on the screen the definitions, and we start talking about positive, negative ions. They get created, and I'll show you a visual here. They get created as the system is blowing the air through the rooms. They actively target contaminants in the air. Also something called VOCs, which is all important. That's the volatile organic compounds, another way to say virus. They attach themselves to them, strip them of hydrogen, render them inert. They also weigh them down so they go out of the breathable range. And they also make the particles bigger so they can be caught by the MERV 10 and MERV 8 filters that were previously not catching some of these viruses. So, and again, you have somebody that, I'm sorry, Mrs. Hillman, wherever you are, I did not pay the most attention in chemistry class. So when we start talking about the chemical breakdown of it, I can go through this and give you the research, but the reality of it is it weighs them down, it makes them bigger, and makes them easier to be caught in those filters that we currently have. So again, here's your visual. You can see the air handlers pushing the air. This needle, or it looks like a dropper, here would be your needlepoint ionization. There would be many of those in the air system, in the unit itself. All the air would pass over that, creating those ions. Those ions are then pushed into the room itself, where it attaches to all the viruses, all the particles, and then as the room circulates, those get caught in the filter. And as that room keeps recirculating, the air keeps being cleaned by that filter, because now those particles that would have passed through, again, are bigger, they're caught, and also those viruses, as they're still existing, as this purging happens, are now rendered inert. So this here is a diagram of why does this work. The equation that I'm presenting to you is that the MERV 8 filter, and again we have 8 and 10, plus needlepoint bipolar ionization is equal to or greater than MERV 13. And there's data to support that. And in here is linked the video in the presentation that was shared with you. But here's the screen that I thought captured it the best. And now I'm not going to lie, there is a time difference in this. But a MERV 13 panel filter, they tested it in a room that had 2.7 million particles in it. Within 34 minutes, it went down to 808. I admit that that's awesome. I wish I could stand here and tell you that we have all the money to convert everything to MERV 13. We just do not. So what I'm presenting is what we do have the money for, is that if you have a MERV 8 panel filter with the technology, the needlepoint ionization, it moves it from a room that had 3.6 million particles down to 745 in 16 hours. And I know that sounds like you have one 34 minutes, you have the other at 16 hours, but once that equipment is put in, once that equipment's working, that's continuous. It will keep catching up and keep purging that air. So again, if we had the money, I would tell you MERV 13 all the way. That's what they recommend. There's a reason for that. But in light of what we do have the money for and what we're able to purchase and what is economically feasible, to get our current panels, our current filters combined with needlepoint ionization, we would actually have less particles than in this study, in this certain case. Sorry, new phone. It would be as good or better than the MERV 13. So why am I recommending this for Strongsville City Schools now? I think this issue of air quality is not going to go anywhere, and justifiably so. This is something that we need to address. Not only just the recommendation, but I think it's just a public perception of when this pandemic is truly over, what did we do in case it happens again? What do we do if, and because COVID at some point, hopefully very soon, is going to be a footnote in history. But what is next? What is going to be the next virus that comes through and threatens? This would also take care of all of those viruses that we know of, because the chemistry doesn't change even if the virus does. Estimates I received in the fall make this a good investment, a good alternative. Now, I'm not trying to be cagey here. The reason I did not put a number in here is that, number one, I'm still dealing with a number of vendors, and the job that you pay me to do is to get the best possible price. And if I start advertising one vendor over the other, or I start advertising one price over the other, people tend to give up on being competitive because they think the race is already won. So I'm not being cagey with the board. I knew this was going to be a public meeting, and I want people to still compete. So I can tell you, though, that the estimates I had in the fall ranged from right around 425,000 all the way up to $1.2 million. There's a large spread, and the reason for that is some of the vendors I dealt with are third-party vendors that want to use their subcontractors to install. Some are direct from, they manufacture the equipment, they want to sell to us direct, and as you know, and I've said many times, at all possible points, I want to use our own maintenance people. And what I've been discussing with them is if you can install a few and have my guys watch over your shoulder, I'm sure we could take it from there. So again, that's why there's such a wide range in that pricing. I will tell you, though, from the vendors that I've been speaking to, even in 6 months, the price has gone up about 8%. It's just the shortage of supply. So I understand that we need to do our due diligence, and I understand that's what you're paying me for, to answer some of these questions, to do my due diligence. But if we don't act, we're going to, the marketplace is going to keep pricing this higher and higher. The technology is getting better. This has actually been around since the 1970s in the United States, but the price point of that technology was so high that there were vast improvements that have been done in the past 10, 15 years. Now it's down to what I've previously told you, that wide range. And like I said in here, the prices is going to increase as the demand increase, and also those lead times, because the supply chain is still disrupted. For example, and not to belabor the point, I was just talking to the vendor that I usually go to for bathroom partitions. He told me, I can't even get steel right now. It's harder and harder. My lead time on doing these repairs that would have been 2 to 3 weeks in the past is now 4 to 8 weeks, and it's just going to keep getting worse. So as the economy kind of breaks open, we're still dealing with this disruption in the supply chain. The payoff for investment, I did put in here just for the filters. Just for the filters alone, it would take 15 to 20 years to recoup. All right, if we went with a lower estimate for the whole system. However, I will be the first to admit that's not the real number. Now, this equipment lasts, and I've talked to all my vendors, the one that I've been able to get is between 10 and 12 years. So I would not bring this to you. Please understand, I would not bring this to you if that was the final number. 15 to 20 years on replacement, but in 12 years we're going to have to throw it out, but we still have to pay for it for 3 years. If I brought that kind of presentation to you, I don't think I'd be bringing too many presentations to you. But that's just the filters. Please consider, I haven't added on anything else I discussed at the beginning of this presentation. Even if you just take the filters, you're still, let's just say this system is in the 400,000 range, you're still in the range of somewhere in the neighborhood of 320,000 that we're paying into the system. $320,000 is about what it would take in one building to retrofit. And I know you would say, well, we have 2 new buildings, but also keep in mind those 2 new buildings were built with the old recommendations. We still have to address these issues in the middle school. We still have to address these issues in the high school. No one right now in the realm of schools thought no one ever saw, well, I shouldn't say no one ever, because there's conspiracies on YouTube about everything. We never saw this pandemic coming like this. So the push was never for the air quality to the standard of surgical hospital rooms. Now we're here, now that's what it is. At some point, new construction is going to have to go in that direction. But for now, even construction that's less than 5 years old was built under old standards. So we're still going to have to retrofit those systems themselves. And now you're talking about, and I'm not trying to be dramatic for the sake of selling you something, because I don't have any stake in any of the companies. We're talking about millions of dollars at that point of investment to replace motors, to get new motors, to upgrade motors, and in some cases just completely abandon what we have and replace with new that are up to the new standards. The other reason why I'm presenting this is, depending on a time frame, this technology can be placed into the new units without an issue. Let me back up a second. If you add all those things in, the motors, the filters, the replacement, that number of 15 to 20 years would drastically be cut down 5 to 7 years before we start seeing. The other thing I didn't mention is, if you get increased motors, if you're starting to run those motors longer, if you're adding to the number of motors, your utility costs are also going to go up, anywhere between 20 and 30%. So again, the reason I'm presenting this is because it is a cost-effective measure versus the other measure of moving to a MERV 13 outright. The last thing I wanted to say on why am I recommending this now. Now is a great time, because with the ESSER funds, this falls completely in line with air quality, air filtration that's in that allowable expense. So we would not be going, and I know people would argue this because everybody pays federal taxes too, but this is not at the expense of the general fund. This is money that we're getting. This is money that we can allocate for this purpose, increase the indoor air quality, and not have it come out of our general fund, and that money can be used for other projects as we need. This is just a very short list. School districts are investing in needle-point bipolar ionization. And this, quite honestly, is just from one of the vendors that I have, and I've been talking to many. So this list is much more comprehensive than that. And there's another list I was given of basically who's in our shoes, who's looking at it, who's considering it, who's starting to move forward with this. But you can see some of the schools that are already investing in getting them installed. Some of them are closer. A lot of them are comparable in size to ours. And they've seen the need to do something to help with the indoor air quality. And they've seen and come to the conclusion that I have, and hopefully you do, that this is the direction that we should go in to have that happen. The other item I wanted to discuss with you, and it's not nearly as long as the first one, is this idea of a bus wash. One of the issues that's always been plaguing our bus fleet is that the engines continue running long after the sides fall off. And we end up selling them because the bodies are just no longer holding together. The reason for that, of course, is the more salt you put on the road, the more salt goes under the undercarriage, the more it rots those out. And to ask somebody to get on their backs and go underneath there and clean that off is not feasible. We do the best we can, and we have a great bunch of drivers who do wash those buses to make them look good, but asking them to get underneath and get all the pieces and parts is just not feasible. Also, if Lodi was closer, I wouldn't be bringing this to you, since they have that huge truck wash over there, and you just put it through and it's done. My idea, and the idea that I came up with after discussing this with Dr. Ryba and other stakeholders in the district, was what if we could get our own bus wash? And then the other idea was, well, if we can have it, if we could automate it, why couldn't we then have other people have accounts with us that have bigger trucks and use it as well? Because everybody's facing the same issue. Engines keep running, the body and the sides fall off. So I have had some cursory conversations with a counterpart at the city, and I know he's running it up the flagpole. At this point in time, though, I know you're familiar even more than I am where the city's at with their funding and everything. At this point, everybody's interested in the idea, but nobody's wanting to open up a wallet yet. So what my recommendation is, and I know I presented this to you before earlier in the year, I just don't think now is the right time for this project. I will continue to evaluate, see what our cost of investment would be. The other issue that I have to deal with that other people may not think about, the cost of construction right now is outrageous. To do this kind of project in this market right now, I could not guarantee prices would be where I would be comfortable to present to you, just because the supply chain is so disrupted. So it's my recommendation on the bus wash to push that back and just reevaluate it at a future time.
Thank you, Steve. So I'd like to open it up for board discussion. Two items that we need your feedback on. The last one that he presented is, are we all okay with pushing off that project for the bus wash? And Steve has a 5-year capital improvement plan and use that through you put it in there. And then secondly, feedback in terms of needlepoint ionization. As Steve described, if this is something he's recommending, I'm supporting his recommendation to look at moving forward with that, get pricing, but it's a large ticket item. It would take, a formal request for pricing to look forward, and so we wanted to bring it to the board to discuss prior to going down that pathway. So however you want to lead the discussion, Mr. Micko.
Does anyone want to start?
You said the expense for accommodating a MERV 13 filter is relatively high. Do you have, are there certain buildings where it would be easier to do that? Have you looked at each building itself and said, here are ones where it'd be easier, here are the buildings that would be harder?
The easiest one, in a stands reason, would be the middle school.
Right.
Just because it's the newest construction.
Okay.
That I know we could just upgrade because it has exhaust fans. The hardest schools would actually be in order: Whitney being the oldest, Sarrar, Chapman, and then this building. Kinsner, Kinsner would depend on, that's on my list of other projects and a whole new HVAC, and we're not gonna talk about that stuff now. So I would say that's the order. The high school would also need to be addressed. It would be a little bit more complicated than the middle school because there's so many different types of HVAC units at the high school. Some were renovated in the renovation and some were not. So some of those classroom VAV units, the big blocks of steel that are sitting there, in the high school, we could repurpose. Some, quite honestly, we couldn't, and we'd have to put brand new ones in. So the high school is more of a hybrid. Does that answer?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Is it reasonable to ask you to get us a quote for upgrading, let's say, the middle school to the MERV 13?
Sure. I could do that. I'm sure the vendors would be, they'd be happy to do that.
I would just be
Yeah.
curious to see very concrete numbers that would compare to
Okay.
the other option, at least in the one that's easiest. I think if we have so many different systems going on, I think I'm a little hesitant to say, let's just do it across the board if we have a building that's only 4 years old that might adjust more easily.
Okay.
And I don't know what you all think about that, but.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if there's some that are going to be more cost efficient to upgrade to the MERV 13, why not look at that? But then some of the older ones, to potentially have to look at the whole ionization, then kind of go that route. So it could give us a nice balance of kind of the in-between there.
Okay.
The other question that I have is, on the slide where you have the Blue Heaven Technologies study, do you have that whole study that you could send to us?
Yeah, it's actually the video that's linked in
Okay.
the presentation. So
Okay.
if you click the equation that matters slide, it will open up to the whole presentation. It's like 5 or 6 minutes.
Do you know offhand, does it have a breakdown of different kind of particles that it caught, or is it just numbers?
No, it's just the numbers.
Okay. Do you have any other studies that might also support this?
Yeah, I can send you some. yeah.
I would appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I could also send you some videos of, I don't know, it's always interesting to me, but what the, some of the videos I found were with smoke, seeing that they put smoke in a canister and had one without needlepoint, just some airflow, and the other one with needlepoint, and how fast that it dissipated all the smoke, would have revolutionized my experience in the bingo halls when I was younger with all my family. Where you'd walk outside to get fresh air, you walk in, you're like, I don't remember what shoes my mom was wearing. I cannot see anything else. But, so we could have benefited from it all back then too. So yeah, definitely, I can get you more studies.
Thank you.
More links is better than fewer links. And then we can determine who's suffering from insomnia and how many links we want to follow.
Steve, I do have a question. Aside from the difference in time frame, what other drawbacks are there to the needlepoint?
That's about the only one that I've found, is it does take longer to get to the MERV 13. Like I said, if you watch those videos of the smoke, you'll see it's crazy how fast it happens. 30-some seconds in some cases, depending on the size of the room, up to minutes for a full conference room. But that's in isolation of, it's a nice demonstration, but it is what it is. There's nothing and then there's something. So something is always better. When you look at it in contrast with the MERV 13, the only difference that I see and the only drawback is it does take longer to purge through the room. But again, it would be better than what we have. And that's where the pressure is going to come from, of what do we do to increase what we have. Does that answer?
It does, and I guess my follow-up question to that is, if the standards continue to rise and all of a sudden there's a MERV 20 or whatever, just throwing it out there,
Yeah.
does the ionization, will that continue to keep up with, that it'll last, I guess, as long as the units are until we have to, replace the entire units down the road?
I would say yes.
So it should be
I
more
think now
one-time
that we're
cost.
here, where what we've had as industry standard needs to be raised, I think the tech is going to keep catching up with that. I don't see needlepoint going away because, like I said, it's been here since the 70s. It's actually been used in Europe a little bit before that. Some of the larger companies, hospitals, were using needlepoint because they saw the value in it 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. And they haven't, what they've been able to upgrade isn't the idea itself, it's the delivery method that's increased. So I just see that being the only factor of, we buy needlepoint bipolar ionization today, 12 years from now we have to rebuy. I don't know if the units look the same. They'll do the same thing, but they may do it more efficiently. So instead of having it combined with an 8 to 10 and take 16 hours, maybe the new one's pushing so much air and it's bombarding so much and so much more efficiently that now that's down to 10 or not. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? It's the idea that's been sustainable. The delivery method has been the variable. And as the delivery method has become more effective, the price point has become better so that we could even consider it.
So in reality, it should outlast the whole system as a whole, and obviously those need to be replaced every so many years, so.
Correct. And the nice thing about this is, depending, and I know there's variables to this, depending if we decided to build new, everything's harvestable. Take them out of the old, put them in the new, and now even if that new, now the hope is, of course, that the new technology is, the new HVAC systems are MERV 13 ready. I don't know how long it's going to take for Gardner and Trane and Brewer Garrett and everybody and all those manufacturers to get to the level of everything we sell now is a MERV 13 to schools. I don't know when that's exactly going to happen, but this will get us there regardless of when we purchase. And if there is a little bit of a gap there, we can take this and not have to reinvest depending on the time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Will we have to change the MERV 10 and 8 and 10 filters more frequently if we do the ionization, because they're feeding through those larger particulates?
No, it would still be a 3-month. That's what we do right now. Every 3 months we change our filters. There's been no indication that we would have to change the frequency of changing the filters. It's just the filters themselves that need to change, or the way that we put, the air that's being filtered. One of those two things need to change.
So if the ionization, and I'm just trying to understand that, if the ionization is making stuff bigger, and the bigger stuff can then be caught by the less efficient filter. We have more stuff hitting the filters. How is it that we're not gonna have to replace them more often? It would seem like they would get clogged sooner.
That's not what's been indicated in any of the studies I've seen.
Works for me. I'm not gonna argue with it, but that, again, to me, it seems like we have more, we're making the stuff that right now goes through the filter bigger so that the filter captures it. Just like my home filter, if it gets clogged, I have to replace it sooner.
I
So
would
that would
say-
be my curiosity, or our 3-month cycle, they're not clogged enough that we
I
wouldn't
would
have
say
to
it's probably
replace them.
not, to use your term, not clogged enough, but then also remember that the spaces that was normally passing through is now catching. So that space that was, I don't want to say useless, but was not as effective is now being effective, so we're not necessarily using more of the, we're not using more of the filter space that that was being used before. We're just using the total filter space more effectively. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But it's just where there used to be holes in the donuts, now there's no more holes in the donuts. Doesn't mean we had to change the donuts, we just got more donuts now because we filled the holes. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I want a
Okay.
donut.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make anybody hungry.
To Michelle's question, when you look at the cost of the middle school, the MERV 13, would you be able to compare that to the ionization cost of the same school?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll do a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
Because right now, what I have in some of the quotes is every individual school broken down. So it's really not going to be that great of a leap and bound for me to call some of those vendors back and say, okay, tell me what this is, take needlepoint out of the equation. You already know what equipment we have. What can we replace? What can we upgrade? What is that cost going to be? So that's not I'll have those conversations, of course, because you're requesting those, but I don't think that's an unreasonable request for people that want to buy or want our business. So that's the nice thing about being in our position is you guys tell me to ask the questions, and I ask the questions. If they want the business, then they answer the questions, so.
I have a,
Steve?
go ahead.
Go ahead.
In terms of the schools that are already using this, do you know anything about them? Like, is it all in response to the pandemic, or did some of these have them in place already?
Response to the pandemic. And I would say the ones that I listed on here, they may not have full implementation yet. These are the ones that have just committed to this vendor that I have that's really interested in working with us. They're the ones that have committed and already passed. Really what's going on is, although everybody saw this was a need that needed to be addressed, until these funds were released, very few school districts were in a place where they could afford it. Now that this money's being given, now that it's earmarked for such as this, schools are jumping on it left and right, so.
I remember EHOVE, which is the Career Tech Center to the west of us. They purchased it, and I believe it's installed at this point. So I think it would behoove us to reach
Okay.
out to them and see what their experience has been. I understand that, I understand why we're considering et cetera. I don't want to say I'm skeptical. I want to research more. It doesn't take very long to get on Google and find a lot of questions about bipolar. Oh, fudge.
Just to make sure you do needlepoint bipolar ionization.
I'm-
If you do bipolar by
I'm just
itself,
gonna
we're
do
gonna have a completely
bipolar.
different conversation.
For example, what I did find while I was doing my homework in advance, and I'm going to send you the links so that we all can just review it as a team. ASHRAE went to the CDC. The CDC responded to ASHRAE saying I don't want to say they passed the buck. That was my interpretation, but they said as far as COVID, et cetera, we're not sure, and we already discussed that. We're not sure what effect this would have based on any kind of research in science, et cetera. The other one that I want to drill down on is ozone. I read a number of places that one of the concerns with the needlepoint is generation of ozone, et cetera. So I think these are just things we need to drill down on and answer.
And I
get
didn't
comfortable
address it
with.
here, but that is a factor as I've been doing my research. And if everything holds true, once I've answered your questions and you move forward with needlepoint, the vendor that I'm the most interested in, I have the studies to show it zero ozone. being produced. And that's not the case with everybody who tries to sell needlepoint. So I appreciate and thank you for doing that, but that is something I've considered in a final recommendation that would come to you.
And then I found it, and the same way you're gonna share the links, I'll share the links. CB Richard Ellis has a guide or document about indoor air quality and talks about the needlepoint, et cetera, and just things to consider. I really don't want to become an expert in bipolar needlepoint ionization, so we'll share the links and then figure out how to move forward. As far as the bus garage is concerned, or the bus wash, that to me is a very attractive project. I can understand putting it on pause, but I'd like to make sure we keep that front of mind, and when the time comes, continue to pursue it.
All right.
The only thing to add to that, the bus wash thing to me is also interesting, not only with the city aspect of it, but potential partners in the community that may be interested in partnering with that. Understand construction costs are fairly high right now, but also I think we should get some feedback on other surrounding school districts that potentially could use this, that would lessen our exposure as well. Just kind of see what their
Agreed.
thoughts are.
Yeah, there's some people down the road I would like to talk to.
Well, I think
to talk about
I mean,
this.
if you need guidance, I think those conversations make sense. You know, for an individual school district to do a bus wash it probably wouldn't bear fruit, but to do a regionalization, I mean, Strongsville's experience with buses isn't any different than any other school district or any other municipality with heavy trucks. So I think this might be an opportunity for us to lead, and, how we structure it, we can figure it out. But you would think, just our Polaris compact alone, you would think we could come to an agreement to save everybody's buses by sharing that investment. So I think that, like I said, I think that has a lot of promise, and I think it's a great idea.
Where
We
would
do
that-
as well. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sherry.
I was just gonna say, where's the land for this bus wash? Where's it going?
Where would I propose it right now, if you're asking me that question?
Where is it at?
I would,
Alright,
I would put it actually by the bus parking lot right now. I would just put it out front where the old pupil services building used to be. For various reasons, one of which I need to research, and I don't want to overpromise here, but the biggest obstacle with this type of project is water runoff. Where does the water go once it, because we could just put it to a drain to nowhere, but that's going to be problems later on. And you can't put it into the pond, the spillway, because it's contaminated with salt and everything else. So we have to actually put it into the sewer system. That building there, I know we temporarily capped the sewer line. So that's what makes it so attractive, is there was a sewer line there. We might be able to utilize that for this type of purpose. So that's still research I need to do, but that's why I say there. It also makes it pretty attractive if we were to get some corporate customers involved, being right there on Pearl Road, so that, we're not out of the way for people to travel to, although I'm sure people would find it if they needed to, if we do this type of project. But that's my initial thought of where it would go, and that's land that we have available to us that we could develop and extend that fence. And as always, I'd want to do as much of the construction in shop as possible.
The other thought that I just had while we were talking is we have a long-term plan for building new elementary schools. So we should incorporate that thought into the air filter ideas and just make sure that they sync up. And you've already thought about that as far as being able to keep the investment and then fit it on the other units, but just to make sure we're not crossing paths.
So just a couple summary thoughts. I love Steve's idea about the bus wash. We've talked about it. I'd like to get through the next few months in the summer, and we always meet in the summertime as kind of strategic planning. I'd like to bring that back in the summertime as kind of a timeline, and he can continue to have some informal conversations. In terms of the research that Steve's going to do, I just want everybody to keep in mind that this ESSER funding is a domino effect. that, you know, you take a look at this project, this is a project that's a significant amount of funds. If we say we want to research, that means we're possibly holding those funds and not utilizing them. It could mean we can hold those funds and estimates come out at a greater rate, and then are we going to use general funds? So what I would ask is that Steve's going to hopefully take some time over the next week to be with his family and recharge a little bit, but I'd like to have an update at the April 15th meeting, and we can all do our research, and I'm not saying a decision needs to be made, because the ESSER funds haven't been released as of yet, have they, George?
ESSER 2 funds have. ESSER 3 are upcoming. If we were to move forward with this project for the allowable uses, it would come out at ESSER 2. Right now, just to give you an overall update on the ESSER funds. So ESSER 2 funding is about $1.9 million, which is 4 times the amount of ESSER 1. And ESSER 3 is 4.5 million, which is 2.4 times the amount of ESSER 2. So overall, about 6.4. But we haven't applied for ESSER 2 funds. Well, we have access to them, but we haven't filled out the application, how we're going to spend it, since the announcement of ESSER 3 came, based on all the different uses on how we want to use the funds, so we can properly, strategically align how we want to spend those funds. So this project here, an allowable use, is under ESSER 2, where ESSER 3 is kind of more directive towards learning loss. So we don't want to, essentially, if we address learning loss, we want to maximize ESSER 3 funds for those and not put them on ESSER 2, then use those funds, and if we decide to come back to do this, ESSER 2 is no longer available. So we kind of want to strategically and think about how we use those funds.
Do we have a date what's the date that we have to spend those by?
So ESSER 2, it's by fiscal year 2023, September 30th, 2023. ESSER 2, September 20th, or September 30th, 2023. ESSER 3, September 30th, 2024. But we want to begin using for the learning loss summer school. We want to begin using the ESSER funds this summer to address the needs now.
Anything else for Steve in this topic before he goes on just to his monthly report? All right, Steve, just your few items, sir.
All right. The first item is the resolution of intent to participate in winter use contract for the Ohio Department of Transportation, cooperative purchasing program for sodium chloride or rock salt. It's resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that we enter into this agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the purpose of bidding rock salt. The contract to be in effect beginning September 1st, 2021, terminating April 30th, 2022. And most people wonder why I put this in the April meeting, and they won't think about that today. So this just allows us to use that buying power with the Department of Transportation for rock salt. The second item there, which does need a vote, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the operations manager be authorized to purchase new equipment from Buckeye Cleaning Center in the amount of $59,482.41. General fund will be reimbursed with the ESSER funds if available.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion?
Based on what we just shared, the ESSER funds are available now, not if, correct?
Well, it depends on how we want to use them. So this goes back on, once we map out the items, this qualifies for ESSER 3. If there's funding still available based on everything we decided, we would put them on ESSER 2. But if not, this is a need that Steve's department needs in order to move forward. So his budget would pay for it now, and if there's funding available based on how we map out other initiatives that we want to use, we would charge those funds back to the ESSER funds.
And right now, this is a part of the plan. It's in our ESSER fund plan right now, so.
Thank you.
If I could interject, I know I'm not supposed to discuss, but it's been over 10 years at least since we've invested in newer equipment. The equipment we've been having on preventive maintenance plans, but quite simply with the addition of custodian hours, custodian staff, we need more equipment, and we need to replace some equipment that is very old. And even at the middle school, a lot of that equipment was brought over from the schools that were closed. So this is something that I feel is very much needed for our cleaning crews and our custodians to do a great job with what they have. This will make their job, I hesitate to say a little bit easier, but I will say make it more effective, and of course, that means that the schools are cleaner and safer for students going through.
So the way I would describe it is all of this is cleaning equipment that we would be purchasing regardless.
Correct.
The discussion on the ESSER funds is important. Anytime we can relieve stress to the general fund, we will. And so if it makes sense when we do all the prioritizing, we would do that. But I want to assure the public that the equipment that we're purchasing for this is equipment we need regardless. And I would have supported it with the general fund. I'm hopeful and looking forward that we can not tax the general fund. But if you could just spend a short time, Steve, describing what kind of equipment we're buying.
Sure. It actually is everything from what I've called the chariots that some of the custodians are riding in that do the hallways. So they have the squeegee in there. They hose it down, they sanitize and disinfect, and then squeegee it back up. It's everything from that to some, they call them micro scrubbers, which are scrubbers that are designed the size and the shape to go in between the desks so that it's more efficient in the classrooms. There's one, I'm sure you saw it as orbital on a stick. And that's the term. It's just an orbital buffer, as you see going through the hallways. So it's that and everything in between, upright scrubbers, carpet extractors to get that salt out of the carpets in a much more effective and efficient way so that the carpets last longer. It's all of those things, that spectrum all the way through.
So I will just share that back in grade school, I, as a part-time job, worked for the custodian at my grade school. And I was the elbow grease. So
You were the orbital on the stick?
I was the orbital on the stick. I was the mop. I was the, all of those things. So, those tools are, well worth it and will make our, team more efficient and be able to do, one custodian will be able to handle much more. So, any other questions or comments for Steve? George, would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We do have one item under curriculum for Apex Learning. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Strongsville City School District pays for tutorial licenses to be used in the secondary summer school program at the cost of $67,250. General fund will be reimbursed with ESSER funds if available. Same idea. We do have it in the ESSER funds. This is going to be used at the secondary level. It's a learning software program we can use it for the summer program, and we also can use it throughout the school year as well. So let's say I'm a student, I'm in Algebra 1 this year, it was a little rocky for me. I can go into this program, I can take a pretest in Algebra 1. The software will learn exactly where the gaps are in my learning for Algebra 1, and it will design a personalized course for me to address those learning gaps. If you want to go and do a precursor of maybe learning a little bit about geometry, you can do that. If you want to do ACT prep or SAT prep, you could do that. If you've got an end-of-course exam coming up, at the high school, the Ohio State test in algebra or biology or English 10, whatever it may be, you could do some prep work for that. So it's got a huge course catalog, very impressed with it, and it's going to be helpful for learning loss or proactive learning gain for our students based on what they need, based on the assessments that it's given. So that'll be used starting this summer and throughout the school year. And with that, if there's no questions, that ends my report.
Cameron, will there be any charge for the students, or will that be offered for free?
No, that's for, this part is for free. Students will just have to register. So it's not something where it's like, here's the website, just go and take a class. We have to onboard you into the classes you want, but this will be free of charge for the students.
And is that just for one summer, or does that carry over?
It's a one-year contract, so it'll get us summer throughout the school year that teachers can integrate in the classroom. So if it's something we want to continue on, in future summers, we'd have to pay another annual fee.
And as far as the students being able to, they just need to register, are there consequences to registering and then not using it?
No, we have an unlimited subscription, so if you say, hey, I might want to do this, and things change over the summer, there's no consequence for not doing that.
And it's, I guess my question is should our strategy be to sign everybody up?
Well, that's a lot of signups, but the strategy should be, in April 12th, we will send out all of the communications in terms of signing up for our summer programming K to 12. And so what we're going to want to do is, you know, we'll be recommending kids that enroll in a variety of programs, but you know, there's not a plan right now, Mr. Micko, to say, we're going to look at everybody's course schedule for this school year, and we're going to enroll you in all of these courses. To be honest, I don't know the lift that it takes. Is it just an upload of a spreadsheet, or is it a hand entry? So those are details. When Jenny gets back, she can take a look at it and see.
I think that's a great idea. I just, you know, from my perspective, it's one of those, we're paying the fee. Whether, if one person uses it or 150 people use it, we're paying the same fee. So it's incumbent on us to come up with a way to
Maximize it.
maximize that use. And I trust that Jenny and her team
Yeah.
can come up with a way to do that.
Sure.
Cameron, this sounds really nice, and I like the idea of finding the gaps and everything else. I'm assuming we will be kind of monitoring this and looking at, taking a look back to see how effective it was, to then potentially look to renew it next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be taking a look, and we'll also be adding a human component too. So there'll be an opportunity for students to access teachers that can provide some additional help and support. But yeah, these type of programs run all sorts of reports where we can look at, you know, how many courses were finished, how much growth was made, to see was it utilized and was it beneficial. And the other aspect that I like about it is that next year our teachers can use it in conjunction with their class. So they can say, you know, hey, we're doing Unit 2 on polynomials or whatever it may be. You know, we can use this, and you can kind of use this as an enhancement to the class.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cameron, you said these are only high school classes?
Middle school and high school.
Middle school
and high
and
school,
high
yeah, not elementary.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means all items appearing in this agenda with asterisks are adopted in a single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any requests? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mrs. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes, and the motion carries. Board of Education other, do I have any Board of Education others?
I'd just like to remind trying to find where to go, but the seniors that if they were interested in applying for a PTA scholarship, to go to the guidance counselor website. That might be something you can do for fun over spring break. So just want to remind everyone of that.
That's a good reminder. Any others? Hearing none, we do have need for executive session on the topics of.
To consider the employment or discipline of a public employee.
Any other? Do I have a motion?
Well, there's not one, it's typically there's not one general one, there's a breakdown.
The employment of a public official or, I think we're covered on
Yeah.
that one. Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Would you take the roll?
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Ms. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Micko.
Yes, we will enter into executive session at 8:10. We have no anticipation of further business. I am sad that nobody made the motion to cancel summer vacation, so we can't discuss that anymore. I wish a happy April Fool's Day to everyone who's listening. It is the last day of school before spring break, so I did my research. I want to wish some of our audience a belated happy Holly, I think I'm saying that right, which is the Festival of Colors. Happy Passover, a happy Easter, and in a couple weeks, a happy Ramadan. So thanks, everyone, for paying attention, and have a good, happy spring break.
Oh, yeah, and happy belated birthday to Seth.
Thank you very much.